We won't be done until we actually know that we've killed the well and that we have a permanent solution in place. We're moving in that direction, but I don't want us to get too far ahead of ourselves.
The oil leak plugger-in-chief with some good news to report this morning as he heads off to a 3-day vacation.
The oil has stopped flowing into the Gulf, and Top Line begins right now.
Hello and welcome to ABC News Washington Post Top Line. I'm Rick Klein.
And I'm Jonathan Karl.
Every day at noon Eastern, we're right here bringing you the latest political news and analysis, everything you need to know, and it's twitter.com/thenote to know even more. And John, we don't take 3-day weekends here. We're right back here, and tell us what's got your eye today.
It's a good day, good week. Look, the White House may have spent most of the week dealing with fallout from Robert Gibbs's statement that the Republicans could potentially take back the House, but this has been one of the best weeks of the Obama presidency. Not only did they pass the big Wall Street reform bill, but we finally see, at least for now, the oil has stopped flowing into the Gulf.
And yet, the narrative in Washington and beyond is that he's not getting any credit for it. People haven't seen the benefits of these things. Oil is a good thing. That hasn't been what's been a drag on the polls. They get the big financial reform bill, as we mentioned yesterday, the Triple Crown, but people haven't felt the impact yet, and that's going to be the challenge for the White House. Next up, Country Road Ahead. We get a replacement this afternoon for the late West Virginia Senator Robert Byrd, and it is Cart Goodwin, a former staffer for the governor of West Virginia, Joe Manchin, and he is going to be there as a temporary placeholder until Manchin himself can run for the seat either this year or in 2012. That has been the norm these days to get these former staffers, but this is big numerically for Democrats. Gets them back to 59. Yeah. They're going to vote on unemployment insurance as soon as this man gets sworn in.
Yeah, but can we talk for a second about the process here? I mean, he was not just a staffer; he was the general counsel. He was essentially the Tom Hagen to to the Godfather, and now he's going to be coming in to basically keep the seat warm. This is exactly what we saw in Florida, where Governor Chris sent George Lemieux to keep that seat warm. Ted Kaufman, Joe Biden's chief of staff, goes to keep that seat warm. I mean, this is ridiculous. Can we just call it what it is?
This is the United States Senate.
Really, this almost makes you feel that Rod Blagojevich had a nice process over there in Illinois to replace Barack Obama. I'm sure that Mr. Goodwin is going to be a great senator, but was he really the most? Anyway, who knows? Okay, next up, earthquake. And I am not talking about the earthquake that hit Washington, D.C. Last night or early this morning. That earthquake was 3.6 on the Richter scale, which is the biggest earthquake in the history of Washington, D.C., at least the recorded history, which goes back to 1974 in Washington. What I am talking about is this, the latest poll out of the state of Nevada. Look at this. Harry Reid with a lead over Sharon Angle, a lead outside of the margin of error. This, Rick, is the first lead that Harry Reid has had in any major poll in this cycle. Wow.
And it's all Sharon Angle. Those numbers have gone south for her more than they've gone north for him. This is exactly what Democrats hope would happen, and it's going to feed the storyline about Harry Reid maybe ducking a very tough re-election challenge because of the Republican nominee. And finally, this afternoon, our fourth top line is Anonymous Numbskulls, and that is a quote from the former governor of Massachusetts, Mitt Romney, via Twitter. And that's what he calls the folks on his staff that were grumbling privately to Time magazine about Sarah Palin's qualifications. Sarah Palin had her own anonymous people go to Politico to dump on Mitt Romney, and now he is diffusing it in 140 characters or less. It is smart, generally, not to get into an anonymous mud fight with Sarah Palin. I think.
Yeah, and it gives you a chance to make Palin top line number 4, which is big. But also, this comes as the latest Gallup poll shows that among potential presidential candidates, Palin has a 76% approval rating among Republicans, by far the highest. Although she also has the highest disapproval among Americans generally.
Yeah, actual people. The whole country.
Well, Republicans are people, Rick. I mean,
We begin today with a chat that John and I had earlier this week with Lawrence Bender, the Oscar award-winning producer. He's got a new film out. You remember Inconvenient Truth? This is sort of that version for nuclear weapons. It's called Countdown to Zero. Watch this. Lawrence Bender, thank you for joining us on Top Line. Now, Countdown to Zero, in the title, my first thought is we're going down to zero until we press a button. But what you're talking about is Countdown to Zero and nuclear weapons. And that's something that's gotten some talk, gotten some buzz, but that's really the purpose of this film, right?
That's right. Well, it's actually a play on those exact two things. That's why I kind of like the title so much, is that it's where the nuclear clock is getting closer to midnight, where the countdown to zero, the threat is getting worse. But also the solution, of course, is a global zero.
So how? I mean, this is, I guess Reagan was one of the first in power to really float the idea. I mean, is this pie in the sky utopianism? I mean, at this point with nuclear proliferation, do you really ever get down to zero? Do we ever really go back to a non-nuclear world?
It's interesting. If you go back and look at President Reagan's speeches, they bring you to tears almost. And there's one of his speeches that's in our movie. He's so eloquent and speaks about it so beautifully. It's his dream. But people have actually changed the way they think about nuclear weapons now. Post-Cold War, post-9/11, the threat of nuclear weapons is not so much Russia attacking the United States, China. It's not a state-to-state. It's obviously terrorism. It's proliferation. It's a terrorist buying, stealing, or acquiring a scientist and actually making a nuclear bomb. And think about New York City whenever that was, just recently. That car could have had a nuclear bomb, not firecrackers and propane. Mumbai could have been the same from Pakistan. The first op-ed articles written just a couple years ago in 2007, Kissinger, Schultz, Nunn, and Perry, the four statesmen, wrote this wonderful op-ed article in 2007 about the slow reduction to zero. And people are starting to talk about this as a direction. Certainly, we have the START Treaty that's up for ratification, which is about a reduction. And there's a big sort of intersection between the people who believe in zero and the people who definitely believe in reduction, Secretary Gates included.
Right, reduction is something that I think everyone can agree with on some level. What's interesting, one of the things that you did for your film was talking to world leaders, ex-world leaders actually, Tony Blair, Gorbachev, Jimmy Carter, people that are out of power now and had access to the nuclear codes and had their fingers over the proverbial button at one point, who are now saying we need to get to zero. Is there something about being in that room or having access to those codes and having to make that life and death decision that you think changes the perspective of world leaders?
Absolutely. And that was one of the reasons why I so wanted to have leaders of countries talk about it in the movie, because, to be the guy or woman, we didn't get any of the women leaders, but to be the person in charge of making the final decision of having to push that button
to kill tens of millions of people potentially
is something that none of us can really understand what that means. There's a story about Tony Blair. Now, I didn't actually ask him this, but I've heard the story about Tony Blair when he first went into office, and he was told about his responsibilities with nuclear weapons, and he went back to home that day and spent the day sort of contemplating it all day on his own. It's one of those things that's just hard to understand what that really means.
Now, you managed to do something that still baffles the mind. You turned an Al Gore, presentation into a box office sensation,
an Oscar winner,
an Oscar winner, and something that it was also a commercial success. How do you first of all, how did that experience drive you in this movie? How do you anticipate that this is the kind of movie that can also catch on? How do you turn a subject as sober and serious as this into something that people want to go out and watch a movie about?
Well, first of all, none of us knew the success that we were going to have with that movie. All we knew was when I saw Al Gore do his presentation, I said to myself, like everyone said to themselves, what can I do to help this man get his message out? No, it was an extraordinary presentation. I had the crazy idea to make a movie out of it. And actually what happened is that after the movie, a lot of people were calling and say, well, we want to make the inconvenient truth of this subject or that subject. I got a call from these two guys, Bruce Blair and Matt Brown, here in DC. We have this group called WSI, and they're these co-founders of this Global Zero organization that I'm a co-founder of. And they called me up and said, we want to do the inconvenient truth of nuclear weapons. I'm like, now that's... And then I was with Jeff Skull, who is the financer of Inconvenient Truth, the financer of this movie, and great friend. And we were in Oslo together with Al Gore when he was receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. On this very cold day, we were walking around the town and we're thinking, what else can affect life on a planetary basis like the climate crisis? And it was this. So the three of us teamed up 3 years ago to make this movie. And so your question is, well, how do you popularize this? How do you make this accessible to the average person? And I think it's good storytelling. I think you have to find an emotional thread, find a way to draw people in. The movie's scary. It's an edge of your seat kind of wake-up call. But it's not that we're just trying to scare people. It's just the truth is scary.
Yeah, the
You know,
truth is scary.
And it's got a currency with President Obama out there among them saying he wants to achieve exactly what you're talking about.
and which is fantastic. When we released An Inconvenient Truth, we had a president who basically just did not believe in the subject. Here we have a president. I had this amazing opportunity when he in the primaries. I got a call. I was one of his early supporters in Hollywood, and he knew me from An Inconvenient Truth. So I got to meet him a bunch of times back then. And I was called and said, would I do a panel with him on global warming for the Black Congressional Caucus weekend? So I said, I would be my honor. So when I was there, I said, look, can I have 2 minutes of your time as you're walking down the hallway to your next thing? And I said, I want to talk about my next project, which was this movie.
Yeah.
And what was amazing was he knew, he had already been to Russia with Lugar. He had an enormous amount of knowledge about this issue. And it was clear that this was a passion of his. So now what happens? Well, he followed through. In the last, 6 or 8 months, for the first time ever, an American president, presided over the National Security Council and got a unanimous decision to go to zero. And then 2 months ago, I had a trifecta, right? The START Treaty, the nuclear summit here in D.C., and the nuclear posture
there's been a lot of
review.
movement on it, yeah.
So he shows a real vision for this. And what I'm really excited about is this movie's coming out right when ratification is for the START Treaty is happening with the Senate. So I feel like the timing, we could create some political win for everybody here.
All right, Lawrence Bender, the Oscar award-winning producer. The new film is called Countdown to Zero. Thanks for being with us. Appreciate
Thanks
it.
a lot.
Appreciate
Good luck
it.
with the opening.
Thank you.